language of multilateralism is just that, is just language. And what we are looking at is still a bipolar a political arrangement. So I'd like to question the premise that presupposes that this is a new version of non-alignment, humbly and respectfully put.
No, I think that I think that's very correct. I mean, they can't be a mirror image, as it were, of what we had in the past, because the world has changed dramatically, and there is no question of being able to say that there is a duopoly, or that there are two blocks, and that you're being non-aligned between two blocks, etc. Multipoles, etc., are critical picture of today, of the contemporary world. But the issue really is when a conflict of the kind that emerges in Europe, Ukraine versus Russia, what do? I mean, do you pick and choose, you cherry pick, you take a position on one thing, you take a position on another? How do we describe somebody who wants to be detached and yet responsible towards the crisis and participate in whatever solutions can be found? Does that require a pre-qualification of state of mind, or is it something that you take in your stride? I think it's important that we start considering these issues.
If I may, I mean,
polarity in all this.
Okay, just taking that forward, when I said that it's a new avatar, today the world is actually post-West. The power is shifting towards out of the West. If you look at it, the way West is actually not growing so fast, and why even the decision paralysis are there. If you take the case of COVID, the way it impacted the developed countries.
May I interrupt you, General, to welcome our former Minister of State for IT and Tourism and Culture, Mr. KJ Alphonse, to present we hope the other side, or is there all uniformity of views, then we are very good in that. So, Mr. Alphonse, just to catch up, Mr. Bikram Chand is replying to Mr. Khurshid, and on the ref, Mr. Shreyas Jaisima, on unipolarity and avatar. Is there a new avatar of non-aligned? So please, Mr. General Bikram Chand, please carry on.
Yeah, so what I am now saying is that actually the new avatar is post-West. So the non-alignment in the global is not there. So you have to have a balance between the post-West, that is the region of China, India, Russia, Brazil, versus the rest. So it has to be a balancing act. So things have changed. It's not so simple as it used to be, and certainly non-alignment has relevance. It is, I'll not call it non-alignment, I'll actually call it realignment is of great importance.
Mr. Alphonse, would you agree with that?
Yeah, Manohar, good morning, Moses, good morning, and good morning,
Mr. Sunil Dang, very esteemed journalist.
Hello,
He was in the Editors Guild, and so welcome. Yes,
thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Moses, and I'm very happy to be here in this panel discussion. But I thought, Moses, we are starting only at 11 o'clock.
Oh, no, we are not starting. We're just chit-chatting.
Oh,
We'll start at 11.
I was shocked. I was shocked because I'm never late for any program, and I was shocked that I even have got the time wrong. So you're checking the video and other things. That's fine. That's
and a chit-chat. I won't dare to start late when you are there. I'm taking no chances. Sorry, Mr. Khurshid, can you position yourself a little bit to your right? So it is a little bit, you're a little bit to the left.
Okay, yeah. Better?
This is better?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are good. Yeah. So
Salman sir, good morning. Salman sir, good morning. Alphonse, yeah.
Good
How are
morning,
you, sir?
good morning. How are you? How are you? Good to see you.
Good, sir. Good to see you, sir. Yes.
Mr. Alphonse Salman, Mr. Alphonse.
Yes, yes. We are waiting for Mr.
Sorry, what's that? We're losing your video, Salman. Mr. Khurshid, we are losing your video.
video.
He's in Farrukhabad. So I think technology is a little bit behind times.
I think there are technology deficit once in a while, but I can see myself. Anyway, just proceed, because at least as long as the sound goes through.
Yeah, we can see you, everything. Please go ahead.
All right. No, I'm just saying that Mr. Alphonse is joined now after we began this conversation. So maybe we hear something from him, or you wait for a structured inputs in another few minutes, 4 minutes or whatever it is.
So I'll wait for the discussion to start, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr.
Why give away before we begin?
Absolutely,
Yes.
keeping his powder dry. Mr. Sunil Jang is unsettled there, I noticed. So we need to get him on board. And then we are just playing the intro, and then I'm coming in, and we just will start in how many minutes now? We've got 3 minutes, sir. So
3 minutes.
Light is okay.
your light is from behind. It is not showing you in good focus. Mr. Dang, you're too handsome to be blurred. You have to keep you in sharp focus.
But he's got enough shine on his head, Manohar.
We are all reaching that position. I'm not prepared of anybody.
Now is
But-
okay.
Okay, great. So
I think Mr. Sunil Dang didn't hear that. Good for me.
so
See,
please,
I feel I am late. I never be late, but I come to know
Oh.
that is a testing.
Mr. Dang is the only one among us who is attending all these meetings, dinners, and lunches of the foreign ministers and of the G20. He's the only one. So
Oh,
he looks well fed. G20 is ensured.
I'm always
That
I'm always attending the meetings, foreign ministers. That's true. Still, I have two ministers are with me, Salman Khurshid and KJ Alphonse.
Yes, of course.
But Sunil, take us to also some of these dinners. Yeah, what
I
is
know.
this? You're having the best. You're having the best.
I have given up. No, you can only ask this many times. So, yeah, please. Global Dialogue Forum welcomes a worldwide audience to our live online debate on a fairly provocative proposition, targeting India amidst big power rivalries ahead of the G20 summit. I am Moses Manoharan, chair of the Global Dialogue Forum think tank, and today's moderator. We have a distinguished panel before us representing the pillars of public life. They are, in order of appearance, Mr. KJ Alphonse, a senior BJP leader who has been Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, as well as Tourism and Culture. He was as a member of Parliament in the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs. Next will come Mr. Salman Khurshid, currently Chairman of the Congress Party's Foreign Affairs Committee. The Congress Party is the main opposition party. Opposition party. He was previously External Affairs Minister of India and has been Minister for Law and Justice. Mr. Sunil Dang, Editor-in-Chief of the international news magazine The Day After, has been a board member of India's state-owned public broadcaster Prasar Bharati and the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, an autonomous body of the Government of India. He remains an influential figure in media. Mr. Shreyas Jaisimha, founder of Adna Law, is a specialist in environmental and nuclear laws. He's a founding partner in Adna Law LLP in Bengaluru and in Singapore. Major General Love Vikram Chand, after retiring from the army, is now Chief Technical Officer of the National Association of Drone Developers and Space Organizations. He specializes in information and communications technology, as well as electronic warfare. So I believe we can rely on this panel to provide intellectual insight into various aspects of the proposition before us today. I just will humbly offer a few suggestions on today's discussion. Firstly, the honor of presidency of the G20 for India comes with daunting challenges. It is an opportunity to contribute significantly to the shaping of global geopolitical thought and practice. It comes decades after India last assumed such a leading role during the non-aligned movement. As in the forthcoming G20 summit, the non-aligned gathering of world leaders in New Delhi in 1983 thrust India under a global spotlight. The situation prevailing in the world today is, of course, different from the heydays of the non-aligned movement. But geopolitics appears to have come full circle. We now have newly formed hardline alliances in place of the former East and West blocs that were led by nations of the Warsaw Pact and NATO, respectively. The new entrants, you could say, would be China and India. Overhanging the run-up to the G20 summit in the next few months is the shadow of the war in Ukraine, as well as tensions over Taiwan and the South China Sea. They have hardened big power rivalries, it seems. Will this divert attention to the summit from the economic focus that the G20 was largely designed to promote? Certainly, the war has a strong economic dimension caused by sanctions and serious damage to supply lines that have caused food and energy prices, especially affecting the predominantly poorer nations of the South, to rise. India seeks a more widely acceptable role of guiding the global South than when it was in its role in the relatively contentious leadership of the non-aligned movement. But its seeking of such a role among the so-called developing nations has led to India becoming embroiled in the tensions of the global North and South in areas such as loss and damage in climate change domain and the struggles for control of the economically and strategically critical Indo-Pacific. Has the fallout of these tensions and the need to get India on board to serve the interests of various power blocs led to attacks on India's polity and economic foundations? Two episodes: the recent BBC documentary critical of the current Indian leadership's role in the 2002 riots in Gujarat state, and an obscure US research institution's report charging the prominent Indian Adani conglomerate of serious corporate misdoings, are seen by many as attempts to weaken India politically and economically in order to toe partisan policies on Ukraine and the South China Sea. Is the role of provocateurs such as the hedge fund banker George Soros in his public criticism of India at prominent international platforms provided in the West a pointer of things to come? Is the G20 facing an existential threat of conflicting agendas of the West and the East? Is the failure of G20 foreign ministers and finance ministers in New Delhi in separate gathered meetings to agree on joint communiques an ominous sign of future discord? I leave the screen now to those better qualified to speak on these matters. Mr. Alphonse, you have the screen, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Manohar Moses. Thank you, Global Dialogue Forum, for inviting me to this dialogue here. I'm extremely happy to be with such prominent, famous people as Salman Khurshid, General Vikram Chand, Mr. Jaisimha, Sunil Dang, and Ambassador Ashok Sajanar. They're all highly experienced people, especially Salman was the Foreign Minister of India, Law Minister of India, whom I hold in very high regard. I think we have massive problems on hand. To say that the global situation is difficult is an understatement. I think we are in extremely critical condition in the geopolitical scenario, not only of the Ukraine-Russian war and its fallout, but things have been extremely difficult. And in fact, the entire idea of the globe being one village, one family, a whole lot of that concept took a huge beating with the advent of Trumpism. I mean, Trump was India's good friend, but I should say, the very basics of Trumpism, which talked about hegemony of certain people, has injected so much of poison into the human vein. I mean, like all across the world. And you have seen its effect in the UK, in various countries. And so Trumpism is going to stay for a very long time. And that is injected a whole lot of venomous poison into the very existence of humanity as one family, where some people think they are superior and some people think that those who are given, they don't need to share, and all the others have no place in the committee of the human race. So things have been very difficult even before the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, the Ukraine-Russia war has, of course, caused massive global rift, I would say. The West basically trying to stick on to its privileges of having the global resources to themselves and to deny the resources to somebody else. It is led to the disruption of global supply chains, number one, led to massive shortages in food supply, which is led to a massive inflation in food articles and also in commodities, which possibly would lead something like 300 million people into poverty in the global south, especially in the African states. So the impact of conflict between two nations, it is again politically divided the world of the West, basically, which is represented by the NATO, taking a certain position. And of course, the rest of the world taking a different position. And of course, today, Russia and China getting together. To me, that is possibly the most difficult proposition for the rest of the world to handle in the future, because we see that the Chinese foreign minister is going to Russia and they're having a discussion on how Russia and China can form an alliance. Now, to me, that is going to be a massive threat. It's much more than the revival of the Eastern Bloc and the Russia earlier, because today China is huge. Russia is hugely dependent on China for selling its gas, and China is a huge customer. So if Russia and China come together, which looks like a possibility, that is also a massive danger to India. India has to reposition itself in a huge way, possibly take a massive political shift in terms of alliance, because if 65% of Indian defense equipments come from Russia, and if India's only real enemy is China, and China becomes an ally of Russia, what happens in a war, in any conflict between India and China? I mean, what position is Russia going to take? To me, it's scary. I was member of the Defense Consultative Committee and also of the Parliament Committee on External Affairs. To me, looking at India, this looks to be the biggest danger. Of course, inflation is a problem, economic growth, when you have a global recession, which was looming around. And then, of course, comes the Ukrainian crisis, where commodity prices have hit the roof. So all these leads to a huge inflation, a huge possibility of a recession globally. European communities is already into a bad recession. US is into a recession for the third quarter. And the biggest problem is with the kind of money they have pumped into the system during the pandemic. I mean, there is too much money chasing too little goods, and therefore the ability of these countries, especially the US and the Western countries, to control inflation. Now you have two dangers. On the one hand, you have a recession. On the other hand, you have an inflation for which the Western nations have been adopting a very strong classical economic monetary policy theory, which might work in the West, but for India, it's a huge danger because this was a great opportunity for India to be an economic investment destination. But the whole problem is we are following, I think, a certain Western classical model by which, because there is inflation and we need to control inflation, we are adopting the classical theory of having a tighter monetary policy. Now, what happens? Interest rates have gone up, therefore investment will not come into the private sector. Secondly, the consumer consumption has not really picked up to the pre-COVID levels. It needs to grow dramatically. Because of that, capacity utilization is much lower in the industry, and therefore new investments will not come. And therefore, for India to grab this great opportunity of India being an investment destination, possibly is negated because of the monetary policy approach which we are taking, which is a very classical theory. Now, how does India lead the G20 into ensuring that the new geopolitical structure is in a shape to handle the new crisis? The UN, which is a completely toothless tiger. What has it done really? Is it possible to revive multilateral institutions to be effective instruments of global polity? And secondly, of course, even a more important issue, how do we ensure that the sustainable development goals reach people? Because ultimately, the only objective of governance really is to ensure that people are pulled out of poverty, they are able to live a dignified life, they are able to get education, that women are empowered, we get safe drinking water, we have a climate which is livable today. Because of the recklessness of the world, we have the climate has become so horrible that there are predictions that the human race will become extinct on the face of the earth in another 100 years. And of course, a famous historian Harari says, nobody is going to shed a tear if human race disappears from the face of the earth. In fact, human flesh will make a very good manure. That's what he says. So we have massive issues. How do we get together? Because 85% of the GDP of the world is with the G20 nations. 75% of global trade is is controlled by the G20 nations. And India has shown a very strong capability to bring the world together. I mean, under Modi's leadership, I mean, we had yesterday, day for the Italian Prime Minister saying that Modi is the most loved leader globally. He's been able to deliver. If you look at the governance over the past 8 years, we see that the basic fundamental needs of the poor have been taken care of in terms of housing, be it drinking water, healthcare, toilets, LPG, cooking gas, 45 crore Jan Dhan accounts opened and 25 lakh crores being transferred into the accounts of poor people without any pilferage. So India can take huge pride that apart from the fact that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world, which this year we would grow at around 6.5 to 7%. And we have also reached the fruits of development to people at the bottom, which means basically taking care of the sustainable development goals very effectively. How do we get the G20 to do that? How do we all get together, make sure there are no wars? We thought war was something of the past. Suddenly we see a war which has no end, and where we see how much can one do? I mean, there is, of course, global community possibly looks at India to be a mediator for fighting a solution to the Ukrainian-Russian war. But are they going to listen to us? Or can we put some kind of a sense into people? And India at least has kept the dialogue open because India is still in a position to talk to both Russia and Ukraine and possibly get them to come together. And I'm extremely happy that the foreign ministers of that the Russian foreign minister and the American Secretary of State met at the foreign ministers conference, G20 conference in Delhi. At least they had a word. The ice has been broken. But I think we need to get this into our brains that the days of conquest, the days of war over. We need more equitable societies. It's no point blaming each other for the climate disaster. We all need to do ourselves. It's just not yes, the rich West needs to do a lot more. But of course, the other nations obviously cannot now assert anymore that you have polluted and therefore we shall keep polluting. No, I think we all need to work together on a whole lot of issues. So I'm very happy that under the leadership of India at G20, we are touching a whole lot of issues, including climate change, empowerment of women, accelerated, resilient, and sustainable and inclusive growth, and the reach of digital technology to the last person. India is a great example. Even though we are not the greatest technological power, we have now proven to the world that it is possible to reach the fruits of development to the last person on right up to the last village in India. Today, look at the number of UPI transactions we have right up to the last village on the China border. So I think it's not really that technology has benefits the few elite in this world. India has proven that it can benefit everybody. So there are a whole lot of lessons to take from India for G20 for the rest of the world. I'm sure India's presidency is going to start this big debate, but I hope it leads to action, because I'm somebody who believes in action. All this debate is fine, resolutions are fine, but ultimately, whether we bring food on the table, I'm concerned about that. And India has shown that it is possible to reach these fruits of development to the people in many ways. But of course, there are a whole lot of stuff, much more India needs to do, and hopefully we do. So, Moses, thank you for giving me this opportunity to make my opening remarks.
No, sorry. Thank you for your wonderful, insightful address. Before we move to Mr. Khurshid, I would like to just ask you, point out, you talk about the two blocks and how India can be a mediator on Ukraine or a host of other things, including climate change and where we are. Now, the interesting thing is on Ukraine, I don't think even Ukraine does not have any problems with India. And India has shown a certain degree of neutrality mainly, but a little bit of support for the Russians because we have a good relationship with them. And of course, with America, we now have a firm ally status. On climate change, even at the last two COP conferences, India and China did present a common united front on behalf of the global South on things like loss and damage. They synchronized. So do you see a point where India can be a friend to all the players, which means the main players, US, Russia, China, and India itself, as the person acceptable to all three, and have good relations with all of them?
I think, Manohar, this is one of the things India has been able to achieve, which is having a good friendly relation with all these countries. We don't belong to any bloc. We don't cry that we are a backward nation anymore. We talk as if we are an empowered nation, that India is important, that India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. We are a $3 trillion economy. So we speak from a position of strength. And the whole lot of this has been achieved because of the liberalization which has been introduced by Mr. Narasimha Rao in 1991. So it has a historical background, but you see, Modi government has been effectively able to take this forward. See, ultimately, your talk will matter. The global community will take you seriously if you're economically strong and if you've been able to deliver. Now, that way, India has been able to deliver. We have proven that economically, yes, we are growing fast. And India is an example in a whole lot of things like empowering people with digital technology. And we have now a global geopolitical situation where India is being listened to. India is being taken very seriously. And I think that gives us the responsibility and also the right to speak to the global community. But you see, the whole problem is the whole structure of global multilateral institutions like the UN. UN is dead, as good as dead. I think it needs to be completely restructured. This whole thing of 5 nations having veto power, I think it's absolutely unreal. It look very stupid. I think so. We need to, restructure these entire talking institutions, dialogue institutions, communication institutions, and move forward.
May I interject here and ask you, in a hopeful note, you talked about UN, US Secretary of State Blinken and our Foreign Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, Dr. Jaishankar, and the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov, coming together. But the Chinese Foreign Minister, the new Chinese Foreign Minister, Qin Gang, was also there. So do you see that as a hopeful sign that maybe we can move forward on the border issues and such?
See, Moses, getting together around the table, I think that's a great achievement, absolutely, because now the world doesn't do that anymore. So getting them together, I think, is a huge, massive achievement of India. I want everybody to take credit for that. See, I don't think achievement of India is the achievement of just one party or anything like that. I think it's the achievement of we as a nation. Unlike some young leader of India going abroad and blaming India, I think it's achievement of maybe all of us together. So to blame anybody, I think it's not right. So we have been able to bring people together, get them to talk to each other, even though the conversation was not long. I think that's the first achievement. But I think Manohar, problem is some people don't understand the irrationality of war anymore. Some people don't understand that imperialism doesn't make sense anymore. So how do we get them to think rational? Is it possible? If somebody decides to be irrational, how do we get them to be rational? It's not easy, but India is trying. I mean, the position that we are, at least we are trying very hard. So I think that's very important. And let's hope sense prevails across the world. This entire toxicity being pumped into the globe, into humanity, saying some races are superior, some nations are superior, the entire, which I called Trumpism earlier, I think it has no role in a modern civilization. Everybody's saying, I mean, yes, half the world is very poor. The wealth of the world is amassed by just a few people. All that is true. And if somebody justifies that, want to keep that kind of a system going, and this is a setup of, this is the structure under which you will function, that is not acceptable to India and to the rest of the world. And India is, in a way, a voice of the South. And India hopefully reach a certain standard of living for all its people, which has to be a lot higher. Today is hovering around $2,000 US dollars per capita, which is not enough. We have done quite a bit. We need to do a lot more, and that is why it's so politically very important that the opposition also supports the government in India wherever good things are done. I mean, I haven't heard one senior Congress leader, even in the parliament. I've written a book on 8 years of Modi government, documenting exactly what is being done, not one word of exaggeration, not adulatory. But I don't hear, even in our discourses, in political discourse, the opposition say, hey, you've done good things in some area, these areas we approve, and we strongly approve of you in these other areas. Say that. We have no problem of people disapproving. So even the national debate, it can't be like Rahul Gandhi's debate at Cambridge University yesterday, disowning the country, pulling down the country, while we have achieved a lot more. So first of all, we need to have a consensus in India that we all need to stick together, fight together, because there are still far too many people in this country who are poor. We still have polluted air. We still have infrastructure which needs to be built. And we still need to face our enemy, China, together. And so we need to stand together on a whole lot of things. I mean, we don't, just because politics is politics, we don't need to abuse each other. I think we still can coexist together. And that should apply, of course, globally, on a global stage. Yes, we can sit down and discuss. And there are solutions to problems. and that the world needs to understand that. And I think so, India being the president of G20 today, we are in a position to get people together. I think that way we are in a very good position.
Thank you, Mr. Manoharan. And I underline that foreign policy was always considered bipartisan and similar for all political parties. We go over to the main political opposition and its foreign affairs cell chairman, Mr. Salman Khurshid, a former foreign minister, to give a response.
Thank you, Moses. I'll take some very important points that Alphonse has made. First of all, I think the spirit of the presentation is to be appreciated. Let me just say that we are not daggers drawn everywhere on everything. It is important. I think that message that we should find overlaps and commonality, and we must record that wherever, and particularly when we are talking to audiences across the globe. And that's not necessary for one to travel to do so. You are today reaching out to the globe, and therefore whatever is said here will reach the globe as well. So that point is taken, and I applaud that point. But this is not the moment to go into intricacies of this issue. There are problems on both sides as far as the Indian conversation is concerned. How we can make that conversation durable and how we can make that conversation meaningful is for another day. But an important point that Mr. Alphonse made was that India is able to talk to both sides of a conflict in Europe, Ukraine, Russian conflict, that we can talk to both sides. Now, that's very important. And I think before we actually started this structured call, this conversation, I was mentioning a new avatar of non-alignment. Being able to talk to both sides is the ideal aspiration of non-alignment. And please, when I say non-alignment, don't go back to the times when non-alignment was at the helm of our foreign policy. Let not that influence how we re-look at non-alignment, the essence of non-alignment rather than the vocabulary of non-alignment. I think that's very critical, and I think General Chand has something to add there. When he speaks, I'm sure that he will amplify on this topic. So I don't want to take away the benefit of receiving that from him directly. The point is, we can talk to both sides, but how effective is that talk to both sides? What have we achieved? We've achieved zero. We've not even achieved anything significant for Indian students who had to be evacuated from Ukraine and are now waiting in India for some sense of relief and some assistance from somebody. And we haven't even succeeded in that. Forget about bringing the war to an end. Having said that, it cannot be overemphasized that our historical relationship with Russia and our huge dependence on Russia today for military weapons, today for perhaps supply of fuel, is less and in a truncated manner of the relationship that we had with Russia one day in the past. It was a much larger relationship. Russia is not preoccupied. Russia has its own neighbors to deal with. Russia has Europe to deal with, and therefore, if we say that we cannot support Russia entirely as far as Ukraine is concerned, because of that desire and ability to be able to talk to both sides, equally, when you mention Russia now dealing with China and Russia now dealing with Pakistan, that if there was to be a line drawn between China, Pakistan, and India, what would Russia do? Would Russia be similarly non-aligned in inverted commas, vis-a-vis India and China, India, China / Pakistan, is something that is worrisome. This was a comfort zone for us in foreign policy and in any age of conflict in the past. But would this remain is the big question. And if it doesn't remain, would we then have to align ourselves more closely with the US is the big question. And in aligning ourselves with the US, would we be able to get everything that we hope and we aspire to? The problem, as far as the US is concerned, that we haven't in the past, and we don't believe that we do now, share a worldview with them. We share a lot of values of democracy and what have you, constitutional rule of law. But do we really share a worldview with them? And do we share the contours of their engagement with issues that we should be sharing with them, but for issues which are more germane to our region and to our specific experience, we need to have divergent views. Now, they may have one view on the BBC documentary. We have another view on the BBC documentary. Now, another view that we have of the BBC documentary as the official view of the country may well be different and is different from the view held by many people in the country. If we cannot discuss the BBC documentary in India and find an acceptable win-win situation for both, how are we going to discuss it with the Americans or discuss it with anybody else is the big question. So when I say that there is a new avatar of non-alignment necessary or seemingly being sought in the circumstances that exist today, it's not really an echo of the past. It may take an inspiration from what we achieved then, but it will have to be a restructured non-alignment in which we would essentially preserve what we ought to preserve is the autonomy of strategic choice. And the autonomy of strategic choice would involve a lot of aspirations and a lot of dimensions that I'm sure General Chand will be able to amplify. But I do believe that's what we need to look for. And of course, going back to what Mr. Alphonse said, that being able to achieve the strategic autonomy or being able to preserve strategic autonomy will have a lot to do with what we've achieved at home. It is undoubtedly important that we achieve things at home that will give a message to the world about us being a successful country. We can't simply hope that because of our sheer size, which is a size that nature has given us, that because of our sheer size, both of population and of our markets, we will prevail in the world indefinitely. We will prevail in the world to begin with, and that's why you see Italians and Americans and Europe and the UK trying to line up to be on the right side of India as far as the economic relationship is concerned. But that is not going to see us through indefinitely. When there is military conflict, when there is a more fundamental difference of values between groups of countries, don't call them blocks if you like, but groups of countries, India to stand tall has a very, very tough task. To stand tall, not just in terms of economics, but in terms of performance. Performance as a country of wholesome democracy. And there will be issues there about wholesome democracy. As a Congress party, we've received the rap in the past for what people in then opposition and continuing opposite parties have continued to say that we compromise on democratic values. And we compromise with democratic values. That doesn't justify compromise with democratic values today. Conversation about what are true democratic values, irrespective of what we did in the past or what anyone else is doing today, is something that is called for. Because at the end of the day, the conversation in the world has to be a democratic conversation. It cannot be a dictatorial conversation. It cannot be my way or the highway conversation. And I think, therefore, India has a very, very important role. And everybody across the globe, whatever their views are today, will have to listen to India, provided India uses the right language. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khurshid. And just before we move to the next speaker, I would just like to ask you something. You talk about autonomy of choice and autonomy of strategic choice, and in that context, we have treaded a fine line, and I think a little bit BJP. I think BJP needs to be congratulated on that. In Ukraine now, the issue is that the stage appears to be moving now to the Indo-Pacific, where India will now have to look for a middle path, if necessary, between again the East Bloc and the West Bloc, if you put it loosely, on issues like the South China Sea, Taiwan. In that, on the one hand, as I noted to Mr. Alphonse, as a great achievement, bringing all together the Russian foreign minister, the Chinese foreign minister, and our own foreign minister on one stage, was good for Ukraine. Now, but it was followed by a meeting of the Quad, which the others, the bloc, the East Bloc, if we can call it that, looks on as a threat, and a partisan threat. That means moving in with the West on the issues of the Indo-Pacific. So how do we go about balancing it? Because the stage will move now, it's widely predicted, to the South China Sea and Indo-Pacific. How do we tread the line there?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked me that question. There has to be thematic integrity, and that thematic integrity must be rooted in autonomy of strategic choice. So it cannot be pick and choose that, in Ukraine-Russia conflict, we'll take one position because there ultimately Russia is more important to us than Ukraine is. In South China Sea, we will take a different position because there the US presence is more important to us than our attempts to continue, despite everything, continue with a workable relationship. I'm using those words carefully, workable relationship with China. If China and Russia come together, if Russia, China come together, and we, despite our efforts to engage with China, are not successful in engaging with China, what are we going to do? So are we going to tell Russia, please steer clear of Ukraine? Are we going to tell Russia, please steer clear of China? Are we going to tell Russia, as far as South Sea is concerned, there we will want your support. We will want your support. We will want your support. There we can't have you support China or be tolerant of China, etc., etc. These questions will arise now. So when we say that there is a need for an avatar, that avatar is not available in black and white. We'll have to work on these themes. These are the themes for tomorrow. And even in climate change, and I'm very glad that Mr. Alphonse said that, even in climate change, there is going to be a need for a huge amount of give and take. Now, neither the developed countries can say, we will give you nothing, nor can the developing countries say, we will do nothing unless you give us what we need, etc., etc., because the world is not going to wait for anyone. climate is not going to wait for anyone. If the sea levels are going to rise, they will rise, and not wait for a conversation between the West, the developed countries, and India, or India and China, etc. There. So, as I said, the contours of the new doctrines have to be clearly worked on. What we need to do is to have a conversation towards working towards the contours.
Thank you, Mr. Khushid. And on that, we'll come back to a few points to be discussed after we hear from General Vikram Chand. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. It's an honor to be sharing my views with such an august and luminous panelists, and knowing fully well that they're far more qualified to being part of the national cabinet to talk on the strategies and what India should do. So I said, let me use my time to give share my thoughts on how technology can be used to control the narratives, which is actually affecting everybody else. Needless to say, India is the fastest growing economy. It has the largest skilled manpower in IT. This itself, so somebody who's powerful or emerging power will have adversaries, will come in the radar to be targeted, will become a primary target. That said, like the Prime Minister said, the days of the war are over. I fully agree with that. The days of kinetic war are over. Ukraine is just an exception for whatever reason. If you ask me, I never expected that. It was more of initially that Russia was posturing, but then they entered. That's something, a larger game which might be there. So today it is actually the time of hybrid warfare, or no war, no peace. So if it is not going to be a kinetic weapon, what they're going to use is the weapon to create a narrative, shape opinions, divide a community, put an element of doubt in the minds of people. That is exactly what is happening when you look at successive toolkits or documentaries, everything coming. It is a very large plan. It is a systematic plan how to do it. That is how I see it. To compound that, what is happening today is India has become totally, the digital reach, the internet reach has gone into the hands of almost everybody. That is why Paytm and everything has become so common. With that comes that the social media, the reach of social media, the creation of a narrative or using social media as a tool is there. And when I say social media, it's very classically done that, okay, fine, here is a elite, learned people who participate in Instagram's tweets, share their thoughts, and so on. And there is a major part which is not so educated, but they are fond of watching videos. So that is exactly how it's all structured. So let me just give a preamble to it and just say that India has 65% of its population below the age of 35. All of them, unlike us, grew up with a mobile in their hands. The balance 35, minuscule of them are not comfortable today with use of social media, but certainly they view YouTubes. If you go anywhere, if you travel to the rural area, everybody is just going in, or you go to the rural area, you'll find somebody looking at a YouTube or listening to some news which is coming up or some views which are being expressed. Internet provides instantaneous delivery of the content to the destination. Mass mobilization of people can take place on a call over social media. Social and electronic media has become most preferred tool for narrative creation. The distinct character of narrative creator is that the principal narrator may be totally invisible on the World Wide Web. Often you see the film stars, celebrities falling prey to it, and just to get a bigger followership on social media, they make certain comments which they're not, and I'll not say that they're well thought out, it's just the urge to participate in the social media milieu is what draws them there, and they are so naive to fall into this trap. They don't realize that a false narrative, which is proven otherwise, can be a pitfall in their popularity rating. To make matters worse, it is impossible to ensure responsible use of social media by individuals or a group or non-state actors. You cannot enforce social media. Control over social media was tried out in the armed forces, and they realized that today anybody who's joining the armed forces at whatever level, and not only that, I'm talking about all security forces or government jobs or even the public private sector. They've all grown up in the social media world. WhatsApp is what they do. That's how they invite each other, discuss with each other. So it's very difficult to control. So you have to actually how to manage it. With this popularity of social media, this has become a passive weapon in this power rivalry which is going on. There are numerous instances of well-planned toolkits being generated and put on social media. No country is spared. It is not only India which is targeted, no country is spared. Like in other countries, even in India, uncontrolled electronic broadcasting media over YouTube's are springing up in hundreds. If you just look at small channels, how do they self-sustain? I mean, they're springing up, they don't need finances. It's all that the number of hits you get, the more number of hits you get, they earn certain revenue and they can be self-sustaining. You know, the examples of Capitol Hill storming, CAA protests, farmers' protests, communal rights are some examples of effective use of social media to generate or create a narrative. I'm here not to debate on the rights and wrongs of these protests, what is there. In this backdrop, every government faces certain challenges. Now, like I said, social media is a necessity for the population. And when I say necessity, one thing must be very clear. If the government, any government blocks, if the BBC documentary has been blocked for India, all it has prevented is that this documentary cannot enter through the internet gateways into the Indian territory. But this is available rest of the world. Similarly, when a request is made to block certain things, it is available. India has a very influential Indian origin people staying abroad. They can still, by other means, express the views and send it across. Many restrictions or ban on social media or internet is treated as a violation of fundamental rights. I still remember, due to security reasons, for quite some time, internet or mobile services were not available in the CICT infested areas. But that's of the past. Today, any violation, any blocking is done, is taken as a freedom of speech violation. Invariably, protests will come up. Social media posts, unless linked directly to instigate communal rights violence, is very, very difficult to act and under the laws under them. Temporary arrests or detentions during protests actually make a hero of those people who are arrested. India is a very diverse country. It has a diverse culture, customs and traditions. No other country has such diversity. Though there is a unity in diversity, Indian population culture has a lot of tolerance towards each other. There is strength in the diversity. And I can say that because I've seen it firsthand in the armed forces. But then, yes, there are fault lines because the same people who are coming to the rising up there are actually coming from these diverse environment. There are fault lines. These fault lines can be targeted by narrative creators to actually shift the mind or the energy and resources of a government to counter these narratives. World over, any control over social media is treated as a anti-democratic measure. And also world over, you're divided into two: either you're right or you're left wing. Unfortunately, in India, a narrative has come that the right wing today has been characterized as anti-minority and anti-Hindutva, or being a Hindutva and not as nationalists, which is a flavor which is given in most of the other countries. USA today is a growing nationalist country, and Trumpism is actually how it is being called. That is also a narrative which has been created. Now, social media is a deadly passive weapon frequently used against India and other countries in today's competing world. Unfortunately, all governments are generally reactive in social media, and so is the Indian government. You take anything, it is reactive. Sometimes overreaction also can be counterproductive. It is an open debate. Now, since BBC documentary is a hot topic, could the government have reacted in a well-informed, well-analyzed manner? And this is exactly what I'm now saying, where technology comes in. Today, artificial intelligence gives you all the tools and means to do sentiment analysis, prediction. Today, now the question arises is, where is the data? The data which is available on the social media, most of the servers are across in the Western world. Is that data going to be made available to us? It is. If it is not made directly available, they are earning money. It is made available to you if you pay for something. All the newspapers are available in electronic media. These can form the data, the basic data for applying the artificial intelligence tools for sentiment analysis, for predicting what could be the response. You could even look at how the communities, society, region-wise is getting influenced by this narrative and how the division is taking place. Based on this, even these artificial intelligence tools will throw up a recommended system. What are the recommendations of how to tackle with them? If these tools are used, the government will actually be making a very informed decision based on not looking at one event, but looking at the entire related events. No event comes in isolation. There is something which is preluding, and there's something which is planned post. That is how it should be looked at. Having said that, now let me see if I'm like, now this the action plan, what it should be, especially at the global level, keeping in mind the privacy of citizens. Okay, my privacy is my private data. If I'm in social media and there's some data in the public domain, it is available for everybody else. This public data, based on whatever is permissible in the privacy laws, where they are actually paramount, should be shared globally. And if India is carrying out an analysis of a particular event which has taken place in the social media, the same thing should be made shared. The governments need to share this data, and so that actually the power of AI effectiveness lies on the data which is there. The other is action plan by the Indian government. Actually, Indian government, like I explained, can use very effectively these social media the AI-based tools to give them what should be the exact response. And I would say that the Indian government must ensure responsible use of artificial intelligence over social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Jalal Saab. You raised some interesting questions of social media. We'll come back to that. And you say that, predictability with AI and other tools. And I'm sure Mr. Alphonse has views on that because he was a Minister of State for IT and you are in electronic warfare. So we will come back to that later because these are big issues because they are shaping, as you said, the narrative. So, or just on that, we will go to Mr. Shreyas Jasima to talk about this and when there are private forces or other entities such as, for instance, BBC, which makes the allegations and really under Indian system, many of the allegations are already dismissed by the Supreme Court. So it is a transnational kind of beyond their jurisdiction. They have made charges and they sit back. So what does the law say on these things?
Mr. Moses, that's an ambush. I'm happy to call it out and deal with it as is. You introduced me today as the climate speak about. So I would like to refrain from commenting too much on specific episode that you have mentioned just now. Suffice it to say that it is no surprise that when there is an instance of leadership that is being demonstrated by an individual or by a country, then part of the job comes with it dealing with adversity and adverse commentary. And so this is part of the course that there will be situations that were not fully contemplated while leadership is being demonstrated. So to that extent, we all knew that there would be some aspect which is unpredictable in a VUCA world that would be lobbed our way while there is a presidentship of G20. What that exactly is, it's difficult for us to say. But I want to draw the discussion back, if I may please, on making progress on certain agreed goals. We cannot use lack of consensus as an excuse for inaction on multiple fronts. There has already been, however fragile the UN system may be, there has already been almost unanimous agreement on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is a tremendous achievement, and which has to be, in these times, at least a pole star for us to fall back on, to look through temporary challenges and to cast our eye on longer term vision. The ability, the strategic importance of this is also linked to peacemaking and peacekeeping. It is only when there is a long-term common objective, which in fact cannot be achieved by any one country, cannot be achieved by any one society, cannot be achieved by any one company or individual. The goals themselves require a high degree of collaboration, global supply chains, and they're complex. And in choosing such goals, there is tremendous wisdom. In choosing such goals, there is a path to economic collaboration, need for strong trade and investment, and also keeping in mind the climate objectives that are being sought to be achieved. So coming specifically to the climate issue, which I was originally tasked to comment on, I want to first say that look at the presidency of G20, not just with India today. The baton has been passed to us from Indonesia. It will be passed onwards from us towards Brazil, the G20 is being led by the global south for the immediate past, the present, and the immediately foreseeable future. And so the agenda of the G20 is necessarily drawing in the bottom of the pyramid voices. And if you see the kind of debates that have been taking place in Delhi, there has been a call for the inclusion of interests from Africa. There has been a call for looking at the events of the Middle East, of the Pacific Island nations. Now, these are not typical concerns that had emerged before the G20, which began as an economic collaboration alone a decade and more ago. So in doing so, there are goals which are being passed on to these battles. One such example is the blue economy. There is a blue action policy that is looking at ensuring strong maritime supply chains, looking at interests, economic, ecological, around the marine sector. And much of this has been documented as well. And there is, in fact, a agenda that has now been put forth, call it an ABCDE, which is looking at air, blue economy, climate action, digital, and equity. And so these formulations of long-term and complex agendas are critical. And while we, as technicians, and in my space as a lawyer, look at translating these strong policy goals and harmonizing legal instruments that are being generated by multiple bodies. It's not, after all, just the UN. You now have multiple bodies, both regional, bilateral, coming up with trade and policy instruments, some of which have a strong legal implication. And I also want to talk a little bit about the hard law aspect. These are not merely statements of intent. After multiple decades, the climate question, for example, has taken on a strong legal color. There have been two challenges, one before the ICJ, looking at the initiative that was taken by Vanuatu and the small island developed states, which the states claiming that they are most vulnerable to rising temperatures and sea levels, and thus have specifically approached the ICJ asking for guidance as to what ought to be the legal obligation of countries to prevent and redress adverse effects of climate change. Now, this has gathered over a country, about 100 countries backing this idea. And if there is, the UN General Assembly has not proved to be the body where such debate and consensus can be achieved. That's where you see the formulation, for example, the G20, and now bring a more inclusive flavor into it. And at the same time, the point I'm trying to make is there is an attempt to approach, perhaps out of frustration, legal fora. It's, I suppose, the equivalent in domestic terms of an issue which might have been dealt with by Parliament, been dealt with by the executive, but citizen groups choose to approach the courts for foremost action. A similar approach is being observed globally. Another question that is being asked is for ITLOS, which is the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, based in Hamburg. And other island nations like Antigua, Barbados, Barbuda, and well have approached specific control and reduce pollution of the marine environment. And these are challenges of ocean warming, sea level rise, and ocean acidification, which they say are linked to the degradation of the marine environment. Now, this is the second example of an approach to an international forum to determine the legal obligations that can be cast to countries. Of course, we have seen the progress that has been made despite these challenging north, south, east, west debates with at least some formulations at COP26. and despite all these challenges, even in Sharm el-Sheikh, we've seen COP27 come up with climate objectives that have to still be pursued. I'm heartened to also note that in the Indian summit in G20 itself, the foreign ministers meeting, where there is a chair's summary and outcome document that was just issued on the 2nd of March, even there, climate change, biodiversity aspects figure very prominently. So despite this tone of adversity, suspicion, challenge, and lack of cooperation, we must not lose sight of the strong need that people across the world have expressed through their sovereign representatives and those who have a seat at G20, those who have a seat elsewhere, and also through these actions that we are observing before international legal fora, that the notions of what India is trying to turn has always called Vasudhaiva, the world is one family, is a strong magnetic node, which is attracting multiple forces which might otherwise be at variance with each other. And I would humbly and respectfully agree with what Mr. And the learned Minister Alphonse mentioned earlier, which is the importance of maintaining strategic autonomy. Now, the strategic autonomy can be a double-edged sword, because if we have observed what is happening in complex conflicts today, maybe a weaker nation with strong allies may be able to prevail for a longer period of time against perhaps a initially very strong nation, which is finding itself increasingly isolated. And so strategic autonomy ought not to lead to an extent of isolation. And India has always demonstrated deep, compassionate care and sincere concern to its neighbors, and has not been anthropocentric at all. And so the climate domain, I would posit, presents an ideal strategic tool, not merely to advance the environmental agenda, but in fact looked at it as a platform for collaboration to ensure at least regional peace and security, if not global peace and security. Thank you, Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Shreyas. I just want to make note a few things, and I'm careful in the presence of Mr. Alphonse, Mr. Khurshid, and yourself when I say this, that I think the legal fraternity places too much emphasis on courts delivering any justice. Now, you know, when you referred to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, that there are countries here present in the G20, and they will be at the summit too, who when a judgment suits them, they will accept it. When it doesn't suit them, they don't accept it. And the ICC, the criminal court, there are countries here present who are not even signatories. So I don't think that is a solution. But and the second point is, and you made that point, that conflict is a basis you have to sort out. You have to bring peace, and then you can sort out the other things. And this we have to join debate with Mr. Alphonse in the relevance of the United Nations. It's a terrible organization, but you don't have an alternative to bringing about peace than going to that forum, the United Nations. But we will now move on to Mr. Sunil Dang. I request Mr. Dang to keep to 5-10 minutes, so that we can have a debate for another 20 minutes and close. Would you mind, Mr. Dang? Just to keep the welcome, Mr. Dang, Mr. Sunil Dang. Just if you can keep your talk.
Thank you, Mr. Moses, to invite me with the Salman Khurshid, KJ Alphonse, Jasima, and the gentleman who's from the army. I forget his name. I personally feel we should first understand the formation of the groups. G8, G7, G20, it's looked like we are mixing everything in this. G20 is only and only for the economy of the country and putting everything into the streamlining and give the ethics and the growth to the each and every country in a same manner, same law. G8 was something else for the political, where the Russia after the Ukraine war or Crimea, after that they are deleting Russia from there and become a G7. So that is a political group. I saw first time, we are not talking climate change, we are not talking economy. The Ukraine is on our head. If allow me, I can give a little expression because we are from the India and the neighboring countries are also understand the national language to give a more expression from the आम आदमी. मैंने कभी नहीं महसूस किया था कि हम लोग इंग्लिश क्लासरूम में बैठकर हिंदी पढ़ा रहे होंगे या अर्थमेटिक की जगह हम साइंस के ऊपर डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं. राइटली मोसेस आपने कहा कि मिसेस गांधी के टाइम में जब नॉन अलाइंड की लीडरशिप हमारे पास आई थी, दैट टाइम many countries don't like that and they attack us. Similarly, मैं अब देख रहा, without mentioning this in nationalism or a secularism or some other element, right or left, economy is the economy. Economy don't see which faction you are. आपको ट्रो करना पड़ेगा, ग्रोथ के लिए ट्रो करना पड़ेगा. लेकिन सबसे जरूरी बात है कि अभी ये डिस्कस में आया था कि सी लेवल बढ़ रहा है, वो किसी भी डिस्कशन का, किसी भी डायलॉग का वेट नहीं करेगा. हमें कार्बन के ऊपर वर्क करना पड़ेगा. बट वी आर नॉट डूइंग दैट. वी आर मोर इंटरेस्टेड टू डिस्कस पॉलिटिक्स. We are more interested for the statements, and we are more interested to see our face and our statement on the any social media or channels. What we are doing for people who elect them, what they are discussing, they are going beyond the agendas. मुझे लगता है कि इंडिया के ऊपर भी, जैसे नॉन अलाइंड के टाइम की बात की है, इस समय G20 की प्रेसिडेंसी आने पर भी अटैक हुआ. हमें मलाइन करने की कोशिश हुई है, मैं इसको एक्सेप्ट करता हूं, चाहे वो मीडिया के थ्रू हो, चाहे वो इकोनॉमी के थ्रू हो, चाहे वो अदरवाइज हो. बट आई पर्सनली फील दैट वी शुड बी टाइटनिंग अवर बेल्ट and work rigorously in that manner कि उसमें पूरा वर्ल्ड बेनिफिशियरी हो. राइटली इंडोनेशिया से इंडिया, इंडिया से अब ब्राजील जाएगी G20. जब हम बैटन देंगे तो हमने क्या उनको दिया और हमने क्या लिया था. अगर उसमें कुछ इंक्रीज है उसको देखा जाए, आपने क्या एड ऑन किया उसको देखा जाए. मुझे नहीं लगता कि सोशल मीडिया की कुछ बात से अब किसी को कोई फर्क पड़ता. आई एम नॉट चैलेंजिंग दैट सोशल मीडिया इन दैट, क्योंकि लोगों को अब पता चल गया है, दे आर फील रिस्पॉन्सिबल कि सोशल मीडिया कहां पर सही बात कह रहा है तो उस पर क्या रिएक्शन होना चाहिए. अदरवाइज 1 लाख पोस्ट में से एक के ऊपर ही या तो ट्रोल होता है या उसको आगे बढ़ाया। इट्स मीन हमें जजमेंट करनी आ गई है। आई एम नॉट अ जजमेंटल ऑन दैट, पर हमें जजमेंट करनी आ गई है कि किन इश्यूज के ऊपर हमारा इंटरेस्ट है और अपनी कंट्री उसको लेकर या सोशल मीडिया के थ्रू एक पर्सनैलिटी को हम आगे ला सकते। माय कंट्री प्राइम मिनिस्टर इज बिजी टू से सो कि ये चीजें जो हो रही हैं इससे मेरा पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम हिला हुआ है या मेरे इकोनॉमी हिली हुई। और मैं समझता हूँ मोसेस, यू राइटली से इन G20 इकोनॉमी वी शुड बी थिंकिंग ऑन दैट। बट मेरा कोई भी बिजनेस या मेरी कोई भी सोशल थिंग्स खत्म हो जाती हैं अगर वहां पर भूकंप आ जाता है टर्की की तरह, या सी लेवल बढ़ने से वहां का आसपास के जितने भी हैं वो तबाही में चले जाते हैं। तो मैं किस चीज की डेवलपिंग कर रहा हूँ? डेवलपमेंट कुछ नहीं हो रही है, जो हो रही है डिस्टॉर्शन साथ हो रही है, नेचर उसको एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर रही। हमें फर्स्टली नेचर के हिसाब से अपनी बिजनेस को डेवलप करना। बीबीसी की बात अभी यहाँ पर आ रही थी, तो बीबीसी के ऊपर भी मैं आपसे कहना चाहता हूँ कि कुछ लोगों ने देख लिया है, कुछ ने नहीं देखा है। इस टेरिटरी के अंदर नहीं देखी जा सकती, बाहर देखी जा सकती है। तो ये बिल्कुल ऐसा हो गया कि एक कबूतर अगर आंख बंद कर ले तो बिल्ली नहीं आएगी, ऐसा नहीं होगा। ये कहावत इस पे लागू होती है। जो चीज एक बार डोमेन पे आ गई है वो आ ही गई है, उसको आप किसी तरह से भी रोक नहीं सकते हैं। ये मेरा मानना है 36 साल की जर्नलिज्म। आप उसके ऊपर एक वाजिब आंसर दे सकते हैं, उसको डिप्रेस नहीं कर सकते, उसको रोक नहीं सकते। यूक्रेन की बात है जहां तक, और बार बार क्वेश्चन उठ रहा है कि रशिया मेरे साथ रहेगा या चाइना के साथ जाएगा, या वो पाकिस्तान से बाहर होगा तो रशिया मेरे साथ रहेगा या पाकिस्तान के साथ जाएगा। दीज आर दी सर्कमस्टांसेस के ऊपर तय होता है, पर उसके साथ जरूरी है आपकी फ्रेंडशिप, कितना आपका फेथ है उसके ऊपर, उसका फेथ भी आप में कितना है। बिजनेस को आप किस तरह से शेयर कर रहे हैं, एक दूसरे को किस तरह से आप फॉलो कर रहे हैं, वो बहुत जरूरी होता है। और बिट बाय बिट से चलने से कुछ नहीं होता। लुक एट टू द यूके एंड रिलेशन ऑफ द यूएसए। कोई भी बात हो जहां पर अगर यूएस स्टैंड ले रहा है तो यूके ले लेता है, भला ही उसमें उसको 4 जगह पे नुकसान हो जाए, लेकिन वो साथ रहकर एक अपना रिलेशन को मेंटेन रखता है। सो आई एम सेइंग दिस थिंग अगेन इन द G20 कि जो कंट्रीज यहाँ आए हैं, जिनके फॉरेन मिनिस्टर्स यहाँ आए हैं, या जो फाइनेंसेस के ऊपर हमारी बातें हुई हैं, हमें उसके ऊपर बहुत गौर करना होगा। थोड़ी देर के लिए हमें पॉलिटिक्स को भूलना होगा। अगर हम पॉलिटिक्स को नहीं भूलेंगे और ये सोशल मीडिया में उछल रहे बातों को नहीं भूलेंगे तो प्रेसिडेंसी हमारी आई और गई, कुछ भी पता नहीं चलेगा। व्हाट वी एड ऑन कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा सिवाय की कंफ्यूजन के। हर कंट्री में पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज होती हैं और लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन भी होते हैं। लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन का मेन काम क्या है? इस चीज को बताना कि ये चीजें ये गवर्नमेंट नहीं कर रही, और गवर्नमेंट का काम होता है उसको ठीक करके उसको लेकर कंट्री को चलना। पर मैं ऐसा बहुत जगह महसूस नहीं कर रहा हूँ सार्क कंट्रीज के अंदर, खास तौर यहाँ पर पर्सनालिटी कल्ट्स के ऊपर काम हो रहा है। पर G20 या इस तरह की जी जितने भी बने हैं उनका कल्ट सिर्फ ये होता है कि आप कितना सबको साथ लेकर वर्ल्ड वाइड साथ चल सकते हैं, मिनिमम पर नहीं। I personally feel these are add on in your discussion. I hope ये डिस्कशन में आगे आप अगले 20 मिनट जो करेंगे उसमें इन चीजों को जरूर लेंगे, एंड उससे आपका ये डिस्कशन का जो लेवल है और डायलॉग है ये बहुत लेवल पे आगे जाएगा। थैंक यू वेरी मच। Mr. Moses.
बहुत धन्यवाद सुनील भाई, प्लीज होल्ड ऑन। अभी उनका पॉइंट है ऑन social media and the current attacks, which is the title of the conference.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
we are
सोशल
now
मीडिया और इनकी बात मैं कर रहा हूँ,
we will now put it to
लेकिन
the,
हमें ये देखना होगा कि सोशल मीडिया में भी हम G20 को किस तरह से ऐड ऑन कर रहे हैं।
Sunil bhai, we will now put it to the general one, and we'll come to you also, to the other speakers also, all together. Yes, we will put it to the minister, former minister, Mr. Alphonse first. The proposition, and we come to each of you on your views, the proposition targeting India. Now, there is two views on the BBC attack on documentary, not an attack, it's a documentary with They Stand By on the 2000 riots in Gujarat and the charges they made against the current leadership of India, and which was all set aside by the Supreme Court of India, which is the final jurisdiction to decide these things. And then this was originated in the West. And then there was the attack from an obscure, it's a research institution called Hindenburg, of no great consequence. And they attacked one of India's biggest conglomerates, rightly or wrongly so, but the timing of it, and both emanating from the West, was seen by a section of society and opinion to be a targeting of India to bring, to weaken India's stance on, somewhat neutral stance on Ukraine and other, and the Indo-Pacific, and to bring it on the side of the West. So what is your view, Minister, Mr. Alphonse?
See, I think the social media plays a big role in today. The internet plays a big role. Like in 2000, I read an article which said that internet is just a fad, it will just come and go. It is so much an integral part of our lives today, not only of the elite, internet is an extremely crucial role. The social media also plays an extremely crucial role. But the whole problem with the social media is that most of what appears in the social media is a lie, most of it. And the problem with today with people is that we tend to believe the social media, what appears on WhatsApp or some video, to be the truth. We refuse to apply our mind. We have abdicated responsibility. Homo sapiens is no more Homo sapiens. He would rather let the net talk and the WhatsApp talk and TikTok or whatever is all this stuff, rubbish talk, rather than to apply your brains. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, we let kids also into this world because of the online education system, where even kindergarten children were taught online. So today, every kid knows how to operate the telephone, the laptop, and they are all hooked onto that. There's a massive danger of humanity turning insane. I'm warning this. There's a massive danger. When a 3-year-old kid is watching today the social media, and he's doing it, she's doing it, and this is what we did. We let them do it because of the pandemic and the necessity for online education. But today we have not taken the mobile back from the kid. And secondly, it's so much easier for parenting when we don't want to spend time with our children. We let these equipments do the talking for us. We don't want to spend time with the children. We give them a mobile, and there they are. And what are they watching? They're watching TikTok. They're watching all this rubbish on the social media. And certain survey by reputed organizations have shown that most of the time is spent on watching pornography. When there was, this is authoritatively, I read an India Today story which said that 75% of the time is spent on watching pornography.
May I intervene, sir? That this social aspect we may discuss for another time, but I would like to bring you back to the geopolitical issue here. And in that, you are accepting the reality of it's widespread. It forms opinion. Now that is the reality. Whether we can change it, make it more informed, make them better, make better use of these tools, that is a different matter. But today there is an attack, two attacks. It caused mayhem in the stock markets, in the Indian economy. Just that Hindenburg report, which nobody knew who the hell Hindenburg was. And then the BBC documentary did cause disruption in campuses across the country. So this is the reality. And do you think it was motivated or was it random?
Of course, it's motivated. When let's take the Hindenburg report, when India is the largest growing economy in the world, a lot of people around the world cannot suffer that a brown man's country, India, can be the fastest growing economy in the world, can be the only silver lining in the crowd. They cannot. Therefore, people hire people like Hindenburg. And fortunately, didn't do much of a damage to the Indian stock market or the economy, just damaged the shares, stocks of that particular country. I think this again, the problem is how inconsequential or how stupid a company is who are putting out the news. We tend to believe. Now, this is a huge, biggest danger in social life, in personal life, and also in the geopolitical atmosphere. These reports, which are completely fake most of the time, are taken to be the truth because we refuse to apply our brains. So we have problems. So this also leads to geopolitical massive complications. When a people at large believe a certain thing, the political executive also has to act accordingly. So there are dangers. Now, what was the BBC trying to do? Was it a new story? This was something, an old rehearsed story which the Supreme Court had gone into and very categorically ruled on that. Did they come out with anything new at all? Not at all. Why are they doing it? Well, call it the white man's burden to educate the rest of the world, the brown man. What else can I say? Now
Or is
it's
it more? Or is it more? Is it a geopolitical attack to bring India to the side of the West on Ukraine and to the side of the West, which we already are on Indo-Pacific, the South China Sea and things like that?
There is a concerted effort by the West and by certain interested parties. I'm not only saying West, also countries like China, deeply interested in getting into our systems and planting stories which can damage the reputation of the country at large, which can damage the reputation of the government. And these are attempts which are being done by not one single block of people. It could just be an individual. It could be a whole lot of other people who are jealous of India's development, who want to ensure that India stays where we were. And therefore, I think we got to be very careful. We need to educate our people saying, listen, whatever the social media says, please use your brains, study, read. If the government has done a good job, please read it. And if this story is what comes on the Western media or some other media, please, let's sit down and debate and see, is there a truth in it? Isn't it? Unfortunately, that's the problem, Moses. Today, everybody tends to believe the social media, be it a political story, be it a national story, be it a social media story, be it a personal story. I think we are becoming an insane species.
Please stay with us. We'll just go to the opposition now. Mr. Khurshid, what is your view on, for instance, on these things, specifically the Hindenburg report on the Adanis and the BBC report, which was, as the minister, as Mr. Alphonse says, was canned. It was done. The report was done years ago. And why now? And why coincidentally both came together is what is raising eyebrows, that both originated in the West and both are for Western viewpoints to condition, as Mr. Alphonse says, condition Indian minds and Indian policies.
Moses, there are some ground realities that you have to keep in mind. The ground reality is that the internet is across the globe available to everybody. And we cannot just complain that internet is giving something we don't like. We haven't yet, globally, we haven't yet found ways and means of controlling the internet. Is it to be self-imposed restrictions? Is it supposed to be an agreement that's reached across the world, both in terms of technology and in terms of ideology? There isn't yet clarity on this issue. That's one. Two, if we are a democratic country, something unsavory and unpleasant cannot just be rejected because we believe that we cannot agree with it. If we can't agree with it, we must respond. Institutionally, we must respond. If somebody makes films, we can make films. If somebody says something, we can reply. We can project our point of view as well. There is a difference between someone who is a clandestine group putting out fake information on the internet and the BBC. It's an institutional information that's being given out. Disagree with the institution, but disagreeing with the institution doesn't mean that we proscribe something that an institution is doing. Now, again, let me be clear. It's not just the BJP that's done it. Other governments have done it as well. My government had done it as well. The point is, are we going to move forward in terms of democracy, or are we going to say, well, we did it 20 years ago, therefore we'll do it again now? I can't be choosy and say, what I did was right, but what you are doing is wrong. That is completely unacceptable. Standards have to rise. Standards have to move. Standards have to grow. Let's talk about the standards for freedom of speech, both for us as indeed internationally. You can't say if it was made in India, we will allow it, but if it's made abroad, we won't allow it. Unless there is a clear strategic position that we in the global space have different views from what we have in terms of the domestic field. There may be a justification for it, may well be a justification, but I don't think that justification has been given. Simply say this is hogwash, this has been rejected, etc., doesn't mean that you cannot explore it afresh. Research and fresh presentation of anything that institutionally is found important, necessary, viable, etc. We'll have to accept. We have a point of view, we should reject it. In the point of view, we should reject it. A critic should reject it. People should reject it, and that should be the answer. It's no different from someone saying that Pathan should have been shown in the cinema halls. It's no different from saying that documentary made by BBC should not be shown in cinema halls. You can like Pathan, you can like the documentary, you can dislike Pathan, you can dislike the documentary. If you believe in freedom, you'll have to impose some constraints on yourself and some burdens on yourself.
May I intervene here and say that every country has national interests, security interests. Every country, even UK, US, I have in my years in Reuters, we have to abide by certain no-go areas. There is no freedom of speech in those areas.
I know is this the no-go area? Is this a no-go area? Are you reporting on a war? Are you reporting on something that is strategic? Are you reporting on something?
Yes. May I just intervene on not on BBC? BBC is another issue. It is that we have to see, as a lawyer, I don't want to preach you all have great law degrees. Why am I telling you this? But I believe that there is a question of jurisdiction. And propriety. Now, the head of a government is legally elected. When it suits us, we will not allow such a screening on something of religious consequence from any country. We will not allow some countries which who have been accused of various things, their leaders to be attacked. This is because we have millions of our workers in those places. So there is jurisdiction. And there is, on the case of the Adanis, for instance, the Hindenburg report, I just submit to Mr. Alphonse and to you, Mr. Khurshid, why can't we see it compartmentalized? One is the wrongdoings, rightly or wrongly, of the Adanis, which is now being in the realm of court, and they may choose to go further to the American courts. So that is one thing. The other thing is, as in the area of geopolitical agency, such as General Bikram Chand will tell you, that there is a strategic area where if India is being weakened, this is separate from whether it is correct or not, whether it's jurisdiction or not. If it is being weakened, then it is a geopolitical threat. And so we have to accept that. This is my...
Yeah, well, I mean, are you going back to Indira is India and India is Indira? That wasn't acceptable. That wasn't acceptable to a lot of people. It was obviously cherished by her followers and people who adhere to her ideology.
I don't think that's the issue. I'm just saying that that there is a national interest, and that I saw in all the great independent news organizations. We used to report the Gulf War and this and that. I mean, not the Gulf War, the Iran-Iraq War I did, and Gulf War and things. Every organization, if it's an American organization, they will take into account their national interests. If it is British, you'll take their...
Of course, you should. Of course, you should have pride in yourself. Of course, you should do so. There's nobody saying that you shouldn't do, and you should repudiate it as strongly as you can. Get public consensus to say this is unacceptable, and tell the government's concerned that this is unacceptable. I assume we told the British government this, and I assume the British government gave us an answer. They've said we've said that we cherish BBC and we don't control BBC. We can't tell BBC what to do, what not to do. Now the problem is you can't have different standards. If this concerns strategic security, then there is no issue. We are all one. If you're reporting on movements on Chinese PLA, it may well be that it is within the area of strategic concern and that it should not be widely reported. But where do you draw the lines, my dear Mr. Moses? That's the question.
You draw a line in hypocrisy. You will not attack a leader of a country where millions of workers, many of them, I might say, not from your state of UP, but Mr. Alphonse state. Then you will think twice before making Doordarshan making a documentary on the leader of that country. That is all I'm saying.
No, are you talking about politics, or are you talking about politics, or are you talking about rule of law? If you're talking about politics, then everything goes. If you're not talking about politics, but you're talking about rule of law, constitutionalism, then it's something quite different. And by the way, the Supreme Court has done nothing in this matter as yet. Somebody said to the Supreme Court, why don't you ban this documentary? And the Supreme Court said, that's not our job. So the Supreme Court has not given its verdict on the documentary. You may be right, the Supreme Court has given a verdict of sorts on the actual investigations. You're right there, absolutely right there. And the documentary says that the Supreme Court has actually upheld the investigation verdict, etc. That's very clear. If the documentary had not said so, then they would be misleading people. But they have actually clarified that the Supreme Court has taken the view that the investigation was correct.
Just hold that thought, Mr. Alphonse. Let me put a proposition to you. If a nation which employs hundreds of thousands of people from Kerala, the head of that state, would we accept? Is it be acceptable to allow Doordarshan or somebody else, even the country, to do a derogatory or insinuatory attack on the head of that nation? Is there an economic basis also? The good of the people is economy.
See, I think, Mr. Moses, I think we need to respect democracy. That's the bottom line. When the people of a country have elected a leader to lead them, I think it's important for all of us to accept and say that, well, he is my leader now. It doesn't really matter which party he belongs. After the election process is over. Okay, when the next election comes, you start your arguments again. But of course, if things are done wrong, yes, point out. There seems to be a huge reluctance on the part of certain parties and the opposition mainly to accept the fact that Modi has been elected. And therefore, I think there has to be a certain sense of pride in what we achieve. If India has achieved in the shortest time, built toilets for all its people. He's not providing houses to all its people. He's providing medical assistance. He's provided direct transfer of 29 lakh crores to 45 crore people, the poorest people in the world, which no other country has done. I think there has to be a sense of pride and say, Mr. Prime Minister, we are proud of you. You've done something. If he's not done, if he's messing up something, yes, tell him also. But that sense of unity doesn't seem to be there in the country. Let me put in the word that magnanimity doesn't seem to exist in this country in the opposition field. And that is sad.
May I just intervene on this, and Mr. Khurshid, please take turn. There is a magnanimity also applies. I think each age, when Pandit Nehru was the Prime Minister of India, there was a certain requirement for institutions of higher learning, for public sector units, and for certain worldview. We have moved on from Indira Gandhi to various, for Mr. Vajpayee, to now to Manmohan Singh, and to Mr. Narendra Modi. So every age has a PM who must take into account the current situation. So maybe the BJP was also a little unkind on the contribution of Mr. Nehru, which was appropriate for that age. And so that seems to be a consensus. So they also a little bit unkind, I feel.
Moses, may I intervene on this? You see, we are greatly appreciative of Jawaharlal Nehru. We are not. He's built a lot of institutions for this country, ran the country together in a very difficult period. We are not sorting at all. But we point out also the mistakes. We do. When we give away 38,000 square kilometers of land to China, when we took the Kashmir issue to the UN, see, there are unpardonable mistakes which he's made. He's also made great contributions. We are not doubting that at all. So I think it is justified for a citizen to discuss these issues. I think it's fair enough to history and fair enough to the person.
Now, from this, we move on to a point which Mr. Sunil Dang emphasized greatly, and I appreciate him for that, is, for instance, and it's appropriate in G20, time of G20, which is G20 was not exactly set up to arbitrate wars and things like that. It was set up to promote economic interests. And in that, should we not be promoting economic interests, whether it is East or West? We have understood this in Ukraine. We have applied it. Hard economic reasons to take the position we have, despite all the pressures which are being applied to us. May I submit that there is a Chinese point of view, for instance, that we move apace. Business is business, and the border is border. And if they don't move for resolution at the same pace, so let it be. Now, may I point out that, for instance, the business between India and China is at an all-time record of 120 billion. So what is good for the country? This is the question before the panel today.
Moses, may I make a remark? I don't agree with Mr. Sunil Dang when he says G20 is all about economics. Politics, economics, the sustainable development goals, all these are very interlinked. I mean, what is the motto of the G20, India's presidency? One earth, one family, one future. So it's just not the economics part of it. And it's the fate of humanity is intertwined with a whole lot of things other than money making. A whole lot of issues to ensure dignity to people, dignity to nations, however small they are. So we are talking about a much larger issue. And I'm very happy that the whole motto Vasudeva Kudambakam, it encompasses everything that we need to discuss, and it goes way beyond economics, way beyond making money.
But you yourself have emphasized in that when you had that interaction with Mr. Khurshid on the achievements of this government and led by and himself, Mr. Narendra Modi. Most of them were on the uplift of the people, economic uplift. That is the greatest achievements. All those most of them. So, is it not important to pursue that, the material uplift of people first, and then philosophical, ethical, which is a luxury for the poor?
Moses, we are speaking the same language. Whatever Modi government is done for the poor, it's part of the sustainable development goals, which goes beyond economics, beyond economy, beyond money making. See, there are two things which Modi government believes: allow wealth to grow, money has to grow. Secondly, the fruits of development must come down to the people at large. And that, of course, comes down to a much larger issue of the sustainable development goals. And therefore, it's just not about making money. Then it would be a very insane government which is there, insensitive to us, the largest number of people. That's not democracy. I think it becomes democratic when you talk about reaching the goal, the fruits of development to the last man out there. And this is where the larger issue of sustainable development goal comes in. And you take all these 17 indicators and look at what we are trying to do, what we have achieved in each of these. I think this is the same thing which we want to replicate. If today 25% of American citizens can't go to a hospital, while in India every poor person can go to the best hospitals, I think there is a lot to learn from India. And that is not part of nearly the economic growth part of it, or just economy and money. It's all about sustainable goals. So I can tell you about a whole lot of issues like that.
I agree. And one of the greatest achievements is the response, maybe a little late, but the response to COVID and how we tackled it, no doubt about that. But Mr. Khurshid also can claim some part of that, his party, by saying that NREGA continues to be an important social tool, maybe, or for the uplift of the poor. It continues in this government to be, and that their contribution, so they also can claim some successes in this.
Also, sir, two things. One is, you see, we have picked up whatever was good in the earlier governments, we have picked up. The liberalization which happened from 1991, we say that was a fantastic move. But was the country really, the economy really liberated? Doubtful question. We've done a lot of things to make ease of doing business improve, so that it's easier to do business, it's easier to create wealth. So we picked up those things, and whatever is good in the earlier government, we say things are good, we take it. Manrega, I think that was a great thing. In fact, this government has spent so much money on Manrega than the earlier governments. If we have budgeted only 70,000 crores last year during the pandemic, I think 2020-21, we ended up spending 1,10,000 crores on Manrega. So wherever it's been a good idea, we have picked up from the earlier government. So we don't have a problem, a mental block to do all that. What is good is good. We grow on that. We build on that.
We will come to Mr. Dang now, but first I have two questions for General Bikram Chand, and we'll come to you, Mr. Dang. First, General Bikram Chand, I think he functions on the ground of hard reality. He's into electronic warfare. The army, they know the reality of, at the end of the day, all this talk, but they have to do the hard duties. His view on this, and then we go to an esoteric philosophical concept of the legal profession, where they believe that the law really makes a difference, which may not.
Moses, can I intervene and ask a question to General Chand, if
Yes,
it's okay?
Please, you.
Yeah, see, General Chand, since you are an expert in this electronic warfare and all that, since I was also a member of the consultative committee of the parliament, isn't the days of aircraft carriers and fighter planes over? Because with drones today, which are electronically controlled, you don't need to send your fighter planes into enemy territory, bring them, shoot them down. The drone can do the job at so much lesser cost. So shouldn't we completely move away from the conventional warfare theories and move into electronic warfare, where drones are increasingly used and satellites can increasingly be used, because you don't need to send a balloon over somebody to find out what is down there. Your satellites are going round and round, picking up every square foot of land. What is happening there?
Can you hear me? Alfonso, I'll answer your question first. Let's not look at drones as just an isolation system. It is a complete ecosystem. And today in India, we are looking at drones as a platform of delivery. When I say delivery, is carrying a payload, which could be for surveillance, it could be for as a weapon system or whatever. But it always it may not be a means of projection. After all, when you're going to just project yourself or fight, but you need the boots on ground, you need projection of physical kinetic power on ground. So for that, the aircraft carriers are required. I'm sure the naval chief who have decided to have 3 aircraft carrier fleets have thought over it, and they are relevant. Yes, the relevance of unmanned sensors is increasing. Basically, whenever there's a hazard involved. For example, if you look at the borders, if you just, instead of putting sending a patrol to monitor the troops' movement along the designated no man's land along the LAC, it is better to have a covert small drone doing it faster, quicker. So drones are a smart way of doing things, and if they're assisted with payload which is artificial intelligence, it is assisting. But certainly the physical force structuring is required. It is equally important. That said, I'll just go back to the creation of narrative, about the projection of Army's role. So let me take just purely Army point of view for the BBC there, and I'll flag is the timelines and what was actually happening on ground in February 2002. And I'm sure everybody in the panel and whose views will be able to make their own direction. I will not force my opinion on that. If you all remember, 18th December 2018, we went for Op Parakram. That means both the Indian Army and the adversaries, Pakistan Army, were deployed at the borders. It means we were on the verge of war. There were plans to avenge what had happened to our parliament. So as a result, Army in February, which is just 2 months down, was not available to be employed for internal security because they were actually facing there. So that means anybody who was in the defensive role defending the borders there. So obviously somebody from the rear who could be spared was pulled out and mobilized. Second thing is the decision was delayed, whether it was in 84 or 2002. Look, it is a toughest decision both by any government as also the army generals to call for an army to be applied against their own citizens. It's a very difficult decision. At some point of time, it may take some longer time. Here, maybe it didn't take so long, right? Because maybe some lessons were learned over the past. It is not happening once at a time. Next was also that the army was waiting at the airport and there were no transport made available. Let's look what was happening in Gujarat, because we have got a system of calling impressment of civil vehicles, because we don't have so many transports to carry troops and storage. So what you do is any civil truck which is there stopped, it's unloaded, the load is put in a safe warehouse, guarded, and that truck is loaned to the army. Most of the civilian trucks which were in Rajasthan and Gujarat and Punjab were being used on already impressed. So there was hardly any transport available, and it took some time. I'll just leave it to that. You draw your own conclusions on that. Third point, which I want to make is, I made my statement that, it can't happen that my citizens, privacy laws are supreme, and rest don't matter. I'll draw your attention to the famous Edward Snowden case of PRISM, wherein the Americans had a law, Foreign Insurgency Surveillance Act, and related to that was also a foreign FISA code. The law very clearly said any non-American citizen could be put under electronic surveillance. When I'm saying that, I'm talking about Google, Yahoo, his emails, everything could be put under surveillance, and you could privacy did not matter. And for the American citizens, there was a court. They had to take a permission from the court. This kind of double standards cannot happen. Of course, all of us are aware of what was the outfall of Snowden getting when he just declassified those 10 slides, and also the Chancellor of Germany. There's no political leader, whether alive or non-alive, was spared under this surveillance. They were all on electronic surveillance. So this is important. The privacy has to be for not only your citizens, but it has to be respected for other people also. So these are the couple of points which I just wanted to make. Thank you.
Before we go to, I'll please respond after we go to Shreyas and Mr. Sunil Dang. But before that, I just want to say on that on the one hand, you go for drones, you go for, as Mr. Alphonse said, long distance warfare and electronic and other forms of warfare. On the other hand, you for the economy's sake, you have to develop Atmanirbhar and develop the weapons industry, because it invigorates and it stimulates the economy, as most Western countries know that. And on the other hand, we have a need for employment, and that's why you can't promote this kind of sophisticated long distance warfare, and then you want boots on the ground, which means Agnivir. Is two different things, and it seems to be contradictory, because as you grow your electronics and long distance warfare, you really don't need that many people. And if you don't need that many people on the ground, you are affecting employment. So this is my point, but I'll come back to both of you. Mr. Jeshima and then Mr. Yang.
Mr. Moses, I'm surprised by your description of the law being insufficiently effective. In fact, I would posit that the exact opposite is true. If you look at the portmanteau of combining warfare and law, and looking, for example, at what General Chand just spoke about in terms of narrative, the narrative is only posited on certain principles. It is the principles, and those are the rules of the game. So the powers, the ability to define the rules of the game and to alter with moral justification why you wish to have an alternate rule, etc., is precisely the techniques of legal reasoning. And this is seen to be increasingly important in strategic matters. And therefore, not just looking at kinetic and technological aspects of defense of security interests, but also looking at the way in which the discourse of the law itself and legal institutions are thought to be adopted to advance certain interests. Now, this is the world we're living in. Now, it is not, therefore, humanistic or idealistic to link the discipline of law with the imperatives of maintaining a strong security ecosystem. I would say the exact opposite is true. That we are now seeing a system where if all we have to see is a masterful performance of those who are trained in speaking all languages put together of the strategic and the legal. You might disagree with them, you might agree with them, but the performance can be masterful if you're able, if you're insufficiently prepared to challenge the positions that they're seeking to advance. So I would say that the regime of legal systems, in fact, is here to stay. And I think this element of disdain or contempt for it is very harmful to India's security interests. And I would like to say that maybe we're suffering a self-inflicted own goal here. We have now left the discipline of international law to be practiced by persons who are not based in India, whether it is for the arts cartels who is leading the charge on the interstate disputes that India may have with other states. And just like we do not have a foreign head of the armed forces or the Indian cricket team, it is as commonsensical to ensure that sure we can have as many coaches from outside as possible. But it is certainly in India's long-term interest to develop deep capability in identifying and refining the legal norms on which India's interests are to be advanced, whether it is for sovereign interests or whether it is for private interests. And I would say there is another aspect which hasn't yet been called out, which is the somewhat of a civilizational insecurity, where we look to perhaps validation from the West. Now, all of this is changing rapidly. And if I speak to you from the commercial world, my experience in ASEAN and in matters beyond in the East, there is greater emphasis and acceptance of developing deep capacity in these aspects indigenously. And I'm no expert to speak on either kinetic or other aspects of warfare, but I would say only this: that link is only to be deepened between these aspects of legal reasoning and security matters.
Thank you. We are outnumbered here, General Saab, Sunil, by the lawyers. So we have to be careful. But I noticed that Mr. Shreyas Jaisima has very clearly avoided. He went to the term rules of engagement because he doesn't want to use the word rule of law, which is a term coined by our so-called masters of the universe who say it is the rule of law. Whose rule, whose law, we have not figured out, and we are rebelling against it. We don't want these post-colonial kind of neo-colonial kind of rules of law, which Mr. Alphonse and Mr. Khurshid will accept. But they can come back to that, the rule of law. I'll just go to Mr. Dang to re-emphasize, to point out that your emphasis on economy has been challenged by no less than Mr. Alphonse. Sunil bhai, just.
Yeah, Moses bhai.
Yes, your contention that we should keep to the economy in G20 has been challenged by Honorable former Minister, Mr. Alphonse.
No, Moses bhai, I just want to mention again and again, you are a journalist and we saw also together from the last 36 years. In our newspaper, always call the newspaper or an agency, and we depute the people, somebody cover the law, somebody cover the politics, somebody cover the bureaucracy, or somebody cover the defense or the war. War person cannot give me the report of economy. An economy person cannot tell me the inside of the politics. That I say. Maybe I'm not taken rightly. Again, I am saying rule of the law acceptable to all the journalists in every country, like you say. But we have our own information muscles, which goes always with the information. If we have that information rightly, and we have facts that this news is on the basis of facts, it may be challenging anywhere. Truth is always prevailing truth. In your whatever you say about the BBC or a Ukraine or a economy or a drone, truth prevails on the facts. You have that facts with you, I am reporting. If we don't have a facts, we are not reporting. If we have a facts, if court want to know, we never tell our source information. To tell this is the truth, sometime we will tell the facts, not the source.
Hold that thought, Mr. Dang.
That is
It is a very important point you've made, Mr. Dang. So we will close with Mr. Alphonse and Mr. Khurshid
one
on
of the conclusion with
truth. What is truth? Whose truth is this, which is shaping the narrative? The narrative is being given by the mainstream media, BBC, New York Times, etc., etc. And then
Moses, may I interrupt here? This is the truth perceived by the journalist. and who is a journalist? They come in all colors, Moses. They have their political ideology, social background. So it is a truth. I'm putting the truth in inverted commas, perceived by a journalist. You tell me, Parliament. Does any journalist go and sit in the Parliament and listen to the speeches, the debates being made in the Parliament at all? I would look back sometimes once in a while because the Vice Chairman, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, would say the journalist gallery is empty. Where are you people? Shouldn't you be reporting? Where are they discovering the truth? They sit in the central hall, have a coffee and chat, and that is where they discover their brand of truth. Sorry.
I'm sorry to say,
Mr. Moses, can I ask a question?
yes, please.
I'm just saying one thing on your response of this. Can I say, Moses?
Yes.
Hello. Moses, can I say something on response of Mr. Alphonse?
Mr. Moses, I also have a question. Can I put it?
Mr.
Yeah.
Alphonse, now the central hall is closed for the journalists, even though we have a news from there, does not matter. I am present there or not. If I have a facts, I am giving the shape of that news. Maybe it's a challenge and maybe it's not liked by the people. But truth is this is a news. And you want to suppress, then it's a great news.
I
Hello.
think Moses Sunil is completely off the track.
Why?
Whole thing of suppression of truth. Whose truth, Sunil? It is your version of the truth and the version of the journalist covering it. So where is the question of suppression of the truth?
Sorry, Mr.
I feel you painted a journalist also in a political color. Journalists never be a part of any political party or ideology. Journalists have own ideology to make their country great. And the journalists always a nationalist in their own style. They put the country in a right track. Leadership
Mr.
from
Dang,
the 1947 to the 2023, if it's go here and there, I'm saying in a one sweeping statement, journalists always stand and tell this is wrong. Please don't do this with this country. If you feel this is a colorful journalism, I'm sorry, Alphonse, I am not.
Moses, I wish there was some truth in what Mr. Sunil Dag is saying. I wish there was.
Before you continue, I just want to say I think what Mr. Dang is saying is there is in principle, we all say we want to speak the truth. Mr. Khurshid will also say I always speaks the truth for Congress or whoever, Mr. Bikram Chan. But now there is a view that whose truth is it? You asked that truth. That is a thing which philosophers have debated for like centuries. What is truth? So now you have youngsters who say my truth, our truths. So it has become plural now. So it is something we don't go into.
Mr. Moses, can I ask a question?
But Sunil, I accept what you're saying, but I must say as a journalist that once upon a time, there was some independence, there were some papers with this thing, but today they seem to be succumbed. There's journalists all over the world to government pressures or to inducements of various kinds, and people are writing motivated stories. And as there was a BBC debate which I saw, and very prominent journalist, I should not name her, said, if you know the truth, then you must put that only out. You do not report objectively, giving both sides and all. Why should you? You're a hypocrite then. You must only put out one point of view. This is a very senior journalist with CNN. So with that, I will go to Mr. Khurshid and say, what have you to say about truth and journalism and the media, which seems to be shaping the narrative?
Sorry, I'm sorry. If you want to discuss truth, must have another session. It's too complicated.
How it is shaping the narrative today, the geopolitical narrative.
No.
Targeting India.
It is Mr. Alphonse has already said that much of what floats on the social media is not true. We talk about the WhatsApp University and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to go to the fundamentals of what is the truth, I think you just require a long session. Today's session was about finding India's place between the emerging picture as far as the globe is concerned. And I think we've had a very good discussion on that. Truth is going to dilute everything. The truth is that we've had a good discussion, and further pursuit of truth will dilute the focus that we had for this conversation.
Very true.
I think
very true.
we should leave that for another day.
Okay, thank you. But in Reuters, I must say, we had a saying, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So so truth is, if you want to go to social media, go for entertainment perhaps. But I close this with my special thanks to all of you, Mr. Alphonse, Mr. Salman Khurshid, General Lav Chand, Mr. Shreyas Jasima, and my friend of old standing, Mr. Sunil Dang, who has loyally stood up for the media today.
For truth. Moses, let me just,
Truth, I don't know, but he stood up for the media.
let me just say
Moses, post-truth.
let me just say one last thing, just to underscore one last thing. If you go by what I've said and what Mr. Alphonse has said, you would know, and it would give a clear picture, that the possibility of conversation between our two parties is not something that is far-fetched. It could be easily done if we made an effort on both sides. But our leaders would then have to take the lead.
We all agreed on this. Thank you so much. And with this, we conclude this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.